and today I'm here with Juliana, a revolutionary florist, who's going to teach us how to make a gorgeous spring bouquet. So let's have some fun and learn how to arrange flowers like a pro. So welcome, Juliana. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks so much, Maria, and to the team at FlowerCo for inviting me. My name is Juliana Bustillo. I wanted to let you know that I am a self-taught florist. My learning techniques has been very intuitive, and yes, of course, I've seen a lot of videos, but there's nothing like experimenting with your hands, learning about the stem, learning about the flower, and that's exactly what we're going to do today.
So where do we start? What's the first thing we need to know about flower arranging?
So the first thing that we have to learn is about the classification of the flowers. There are 4 classifications, and once you understand this, it's going to be a lot more easier for you to understand when to use each flower, because each one has a purpose. So the first classification that we're going to understand is the focal flower. What is the focal flower? This is the flower or the special moment where you want your eye first to focus on. Here on this table we have lots of focal flowers that you can find in FlowerCo. So the thing is, how can we detect which flower is a focal flower? And basically it's very simple. The focal flowers are those that are visually compelling. For example, a classic example of a focal flower is a garden rose. Just by looking at it, you can see how sophisticated it is and how much volume it has. Another great example is the ranunculus. This is amazing because although it has a very delicate stem, it's so vapory and also very sophisticated. Another great example of a focal flower is the hydrangea. So here we can see that not necessarily a focal flower has to have a small head like an escabiosa or a ranunculus, but here we see something very different. Many people think that this flower is very delicate, that it has a very short vase life, but actually it's a very sturdy flower and can last for over 2 weeks. Another of my favorites is the stalk. This is amazing because it has a delicious aroma. It really reminds me of a Christmassy smell. You can find stalk in a whole bunch of colors, and that's amazing. Also, you can find it double stalk or single stem stalk. Something very important is that these, besides the fact that they're focal flowers, they are also called line flowers. And what this means is that when composing, it's very important that you respect the whole shape of the flower. Meaning that if you're gonna place a flower next to this one, it's important that you don't put it right in the same level, but here in a lower level, so that the line flower can have its protagonism. Another flower which I love is the Veronica. And this is also a little type of line flower, because what you have to do is respect the stem. If you were to put flowers here at this level, it wouldn't be an intelligent option because you're hiding the flower. What you need to do is put the rest of your flower at this level so that you can really respect the stem. Another thing with the Veronica is that if you were to put flowers at this level, then there wouldn't be anything to show. The flower loses its value and what it's communicating. But if you put the flower here, not only are you accentuating the stem, but also accentuating the line of the flower. So here are 2 other focal flowers which I love, which are escabiosas. You can find them in a lot of different tones, especially in pinks and purples, and callas. The beauty about the callas is that you really can play with the stem and the movement of the stem, as you can see here. If you're going to play with these flowers, I suggest that you accentuate its stem so that you have more movement in your arrangement. So with these escabiosas, I want to show you that not necessarily focal flowers have to be big like the hydrangea that I just showed you. You can also find very delicate stemmed flowers that have lots of movement. And here, what is very important is to accentuate the stem, because the stem is part of the flower. Last but not least, we have our Craspedias. And these are amazing because not only they last a whole bunch, but they have the cute factor, which I like to call. And they just make everything more bubbly, more fun. And of course, these, if you're gonna place these, they are placed so you can accentuate the stem. So when placing Craspedias, it's very important that you place them above all of the other flowers and play with their height. They are much more fun and a cute detail if you accentuate the stem. So the next classification is the complementary flowers, and as its name suggests, it complements the focal flowers. What is very important to learn here is that these flowers are very sturdy, they're very long lasting, and that's one of the main characteristics of this classification. So here we have, for example, buttons, we also have daisies, we have astromelia, here we can put in carnations, spray carnations, and green ball. We also have Hypericum, and one of my personal favorites, which is spray roses. My favorite flower is most definitely the carnation, because not only does it have a long-lasting stem, it actually has a vase life of around a month, 3 weeks, but also the most compelling aspect of this flower is that it has around 120 varieties of tones, which is amazing because it helps you to harmonize a color palette. For example, if you have a red, yellow, and blue color palette, how can you combine it so that it isn't so colorful? With what? Through carnations. So when composing, the most important aspect is to play with heights. For example, if you have such a beautiful and costly flower, such as a garden rose, what you need to do is elongate the stem so that the complementary flower is beneath the focal flower. This is very important so that you can play with lots of height and more depth add more depth to your arrangement. Just look at this effect. Here, you're not appreciating as much the garden rose, which is your focal flower, but if you just elongate it, then here, the complementary is actually complementing your focal flower. This is what you're looking for when composing.
Juliana, I feel like we've learned so much already, and I have to say my absolute favorite is this garden rose.
Yeah, this color is actually called Antique. They're from Alexandra Farms.
Oh yeah, one of the most important breeders actually here in Colombia. So I wanted to ask you, I also love greenery. How do we use it?
Okay, so greenery is actually the third classification. When talking about greens, there's actually a trend which is called greenery, which is to compose a flower arrangement only with foliage. And when talking about foliage, there's hundreds and thousands of different types of foliage, from mass consumption foliages which are grown in farms, but also you can use foliages by just picking out certain stems from a nearby tree that you like in your house.
At Flower Co, we love using eucalyptus, especially because it smells so good.
Yeah, the aroma is amazing. That's something very cool about foliages, as that they give off amazing aroma. It is also one of my favorite because this foliage is so versatile. You can find around 9 varieties of eucalyptus. And It's very beautiful because it also has different shades of green, and the stem has different movement, which is so important when composing. For example, we can have the classic baby blue, and as you can see, it has this bounce effect, which is beautiful. We also have the classic parvifolia and the silver dollar. What you need to know when selecting what eucalyptus you want, what you need to know is that what is the movement of the stem? For example, what I wouldn't do is put a whole bunch of flowers so that at the end you can only see the tip of the eucalyptus. What I want here is to accentuate the stem and place the rest of the flowers around here. So here you can see the power of greenery. How? Well, greenery adds a bunch of things. One is texture and depth, because as you can see, each green has its own type of green. Eucalyptus has a more grayish tone. More tropical foliages such as Ruscus, Aralia, and Cocculus have a more vibrant green. And also look at the movement that it gives off. It would be very different if you only used one type of green, making your arrangement more one-dimensional. But if you use, the more foliages that you use, the more texture, the more volume, the more movement that you're going to have in your composition. So last but not least, we have our fourth classification, which are the fillers. And as its name suggests, what they do is they fill in the blank and give the last finishing touches up on your arrangement. I'm going to show you. So a classic example of fillers is, well, we can have what we call statice or limonium, but also we have solidago. This is a very vibrant, beautiful yellow, and it's used just to fill in the blanks so that you can finish up your arrangement. So it's amazing, but all of these flowers, you can find them at Flower Co. One thing that I really want to let you know is that the key to a good composition is to have a balance of all four classifications. It's not to just put a whole bunch of focal flowers or do an arrangement with only complementary flowers, but have a balance of the four. Focal flowers, complementary, foliage, and fillers.
I also wanted to add that all the flowers we see here today are fresh cut from the crops here in Colombia, and these are actually the flowers we use day to day at Flower Co.
So Maria, now that we understand the purpose of each flower through its classification process, I'm going to show you how to do a bouquet. A bouquet is something that everyone must learn how to do, because when you want to arrange something pretty for your house, it's just you rely upon the technique and build your vases however you design your vases however you want.
Sounds awesome. I think we're now all ready to get started.
Okay, so I'm going to show you guys a technique which I call teepee, because that's at the end of the exercise what we're going to have. Our stems are going to resemble the structure of a teepee, okay? So here you guys have to pay lots of attention, because creativity is endless. There are no rules in floral designs, but what there is technique, so that you can have an arrangement that is functional and that lasts. So this is actually our standing pose. This is the pose that you always want to make sure you have, which is diagonal, where your left hand is holding the head of the flower and your right hand is holding the bottom of the stem, like this. Not like this, not like this, not like this, always like this. Once we have this standing pose, then we just want to experiment with all of the flowers that we have. You can switch up, put a focal flower, then a complementary flower, then a foliage, and you can build it however you want. So I always like to start with a rose because I think it's a very sturdy, strong stem. And now I'm just gonna keep on adding flowers. So you can choose whatever you want. I think let's make it a spring bouquet. So let's put lots of yellow and corals and purples. So I'm gonna start with this carnation. Maria, you can put whatever you like. Okay. So when placing the second flower, you must do it as follows. So always the head of the flower has to be looking to your chest, facing your chest, so that the stem is facing outwards. So you're going to place the flower on top of your previous stem, which is your rose, and you place it on top in a perpendicular manner, like so. And you just hold with your fingers like this, very simple, so that at the end you have type of a X shape.
Okay, so how am I doing so far?
You're doing perfect. What I can actually recommend is to take off all of the petals of the stem, because they're not even going to show in the final result. So take them all out. So what you're actually working with is the head of the flower. So here I have placed 2 flowers, but remember, you always have to give a little oomph to the focal flower. So what I'm going to do is put this focal flower higher than the carnation, so that we're always working with the hierarchy in the classification process. Now, I'm just gonna keep on adding flowers. So Maria, you're doing perfect. Just keep on adding whatever flower you like. So remember, when adding the third stem, face of the flower always facing to your chest, the stem facing outwards, place it on top of your previous stem, which in this case is my carnation, and just grab it with my fingers. And here is amazing, because actually you can see the structure of the teepee, where you can see that no stem is touching each other. And the process of making the bouquet is just actually piling up flower after flower after flower, so that no stems are touching. So far I have placed a focal flower, a complementary flower, a filler, and now I'm gonna add a foliage. Here we have a ruscus, but what is very important is that you have to clean out the stem. What does this mean? If I were to just place this here, none of this is going to show. So what I have to do is clean it out. How? Just plucking out these leaves. So now we have a clean stem, and we just put it like so. Remember, head of the flower facing us, stem outwards, perpendicular, placing it on top of the previous stem that you have put. This way, by eliminating all of the leaves that are not even going to show, because what is actually showing is what's on top of here, you're going to actually elongate the life of your flowers. Because quick tip number 1, everything, all the leaves that you leave underwater is going to immediately create a muddle of bacteria. So now that I've placed 4 flowers, which are actually each of the classifications, I'm gonna keep on adding more. And this is a good example to show how to elongate and make the flower a little bit more stylish. So look here, I'm gonna put this escabiosa, but if I put it at this level, it's not even gonna show. It's not even a focal flower. But if I elongate the stem, then this is actually making your focal flower a showstopper moment. Because the stem is part of the flower and it's very beautiful. There's stems that are worthwhile showing. So Maria, just keep on adding your flowers, always making sure that you're very precise and very organized in placing the flowers as I teach you. Face of the head of the flower facing your chest, the stem facing outwards, placing it on top of your previous flower in a perpendicular movement. And here you can see how useful this technique is, because you can have your flowers here and you can see 360 how your bouquet is turning out. The key with this technique is to really be organized with your technique and making sure that every flower you're putting it as I have taught. Another thing that I want to say is that flowers are so beautiful. The good thing with working with flowers is that don't get up a lot in your head if the colors are working right or if this looks pretty or not. Remember, creativity is endless. It only has to look beautiful for you.
Those are really useful tips. I had never used this technique before, and I'm noticing that my fingers are actually getting tired.
Well, I'm very glad you mentioned it because that's very normal. Of course, our initial technique is just to hold on to the flowers like so, like just grasping, this grasping movement. When this becomes uncomfortable because you kept on adding flowers, then what you can do is, instead of this, just hold it like so. So actually, you take the flowers like in a little, placing a little circle with your hands and just grabbing it like this. This way, it's much more comfortable.
Feels much better.
Yeah. So I've actually added a bit more of stems to my creation. And let's just suppose that I want to place this garden rose here, not here. The correct thing to do is to place it, as I've always explained, head facing your chest, stem facing outwards, and placing it right here. But let's say I don't want to place it here. I want to place it here. What I can't do is go against the technique and do this. This is a big no-no. But if I want it here, what I will do is just open my hand, turn it, and then place it accordingly. Remember, please, please, please don't do this. This is not the technique that I've showed you. Always here, like so. So as you can see, by playing with hierarchy in the classifications, we are intentionally putting the stems, which I know are my focal flowers, higher. Especially the ranunculus, line flowers such as stock, the escabiosa, and of course our lovely garden rose. Something that is very typical when doing hand-tied bouquets is that when doing it, many of your focal flowers tend to go down. So to bring them back up, it's very simple. Just open up your hand a little bit more, open up the hole, and just carefully take the head of the flower and bring it back up.
I really like what I've created so far, but I wanted to ask, how many focal flowers do you think we should use? Is there a limit, like a restriction?
Okay, so there are no restrictions. Remember, in floral design, there are no rules. But what I can say is that there should be, in every composition, there should be around 3 or 4 focal moments. So make sure, it doesn't mean focal flowers, means focal moments. So that if you're placing this bouquet as a centerpiece on your table, everyone in the table has a focal moment to look for. So that when looking at it, every person has something beautiful to look at. At every angle, there is a focal moment. So when finalizing your bouquet, I suggest you turn to a stem of eucalyptus silver dollar. Why? Because just by placing it, you can see how it accentuates and grows your bouquet. It gives greater movement to the composition.
So, Juliana, this is my creation so far. How do you see it? Do you think there's anything I could improve?
Well, actually, I want to congratulate you because your technique is spot on. How do you know it's spot on? Because none of the stems are touching each other, and that's always great signs of a good technique. But my feedback in this case is that, as you can see, there are some flowers that are not even showing. So just get your head of the flower and elongate the stems. For example, a clear example is this Craspedia. As you can see, if we place it here, maybe it gets confused or people don't actually see it. But if you stick out the stem a little bit more, then there is a cute moment. So the good thing about using big-headed focal flowers is that they actually make your composition grow a whole bunch. So always rely on hydrangeas to do exactly that. So look, by just adding one stem, my bouquet has grown a whole bunch. Now, I'm ready to cut. I'm ready to place it in my vase. Many people ask me one question, and is, how many stems am I supposed to put in a bouquet? And the answer is, it depends on how big your vase is. So if you have a big vase, then it's gonna need a whole bunch of flowers. But if you have a little vase, then you will need fewer stems. So before cutting, I actually need to see if there's any last adjustments I need to do. Bring up some flowers, readjust any stem. And once you have it just the way you want it, then we're ready to cut our stems. So to do this, first we need to know how tall is your vase. In this case, I'm gonna put my flowers in this vase, okay? So to measure, I'm gonna see how tall I want my flowers. Do you want them here? Do you want them here? Do you want them in between? In this case, I'm gonna put them in between. And then I am going to cut all the stems of the flowers in a line. One stem at a time. And also I am going to cut it diagonally. Why is it so important to cut the stems diagonally and not straight? Because if we cut our stems diagonally, we're gonna increase the amount of water that's gonna go through the stem. We're gonna increase the surface area and more water is gonna go into these stems. So, once I have cut them all in a line, I am going to place it in my vase. Like so. And this is amazing because actually here we have 20 stems, and you can see what 20 stems can do. It actually fills up a standard size vase. So it's amazing to see how 20 stems go a long way, because here you can see that they look beautiful, they have space, they have air, and you just adjust it. You just pick and choose what you want to change, how you want to change it, and voila.
Okay, so I cut mine a little longer because my vase is a bit taller than yours.
Perfect. So just place it in and look.
Wow.
It looks amazing. Look at how by adding length to your focal flowers, you give more volume and more pizzazz to your arrangement, and just reaccommodate whatever you want, whatever you think. If you want to add a little bit more foliage, you're welcome to. And I want to show you 2 or 3 tips that are gonna work great so that your flowers last longer in your vase.
Awesome.
Okay, so the first is cut your stems diagonally. 2, don't leave flowers in the sunlight, because plants need sunlight, not cut flowers. Cut flowers, what they need is cold. So I would suggest that you leave it in a space in your house where the flowers are not getting direct sunlight. 3, always change the water of your vase around every 2 days. Why? Because if you leave the water longer, you're going to see how the water becomes murky, full of bacteria. Stems tend to last not as long if they're with other types of flowers, because they all have different types of germs. So that's very important. And 4th, something that works magic is putting some ice cubes into your water. This way, it will make them like more crispy and make them feel as if they were in their natural habitat, which is usually cold weather. And 5th, I also highly recommend that you put in a little bit of sugar.
Oh, wow.
Sugar, why? Because it's food for them. They love sugar. Or you can also use the typical packages, powder packages, flower food. That works great, but I especially love adding sugar because I think they appreciate it a little bit more, and ice cubes, they work very well as well. Another thing that I want, 6, this class is full of tips, is that once you're changing the water after the 2nd day, it's important not only just to replace the water, but to clean out the vase, because the vase is already gonna have this thin layer of bacteria. So it's important to clean out the vase and also clean out the stems underwater and cut again. Why? Because after certain days underwater, the stems tend to soften and lose a lot of their sturdy properties in the stem. So what you can do is recut, and it's like an effect, like their capillaries are gonna breathe again.
Well, thank you for such fantastic tips. That's really helpful for all flower lovers. I just had 2 last questions.
Yes.
First of all, what if we don't have this kind of furniture at home? What can we use, like kitchen scissors or a knife is better? What do you recommend?
Well, if you don't have these that are for florist purposes, you can also use gardening scissors or blades that just actually lots of florists use knife blades just to cut the flowers in diagonal and work with it.
Oh, sure, sounds great. My last question is, summer season is just around the corner, and you were saying sun really damages this kind of fresh bouquet. So should we add ice daily to the vase, or what are your recommendations for hot seasons?
I think for hot seasons or people that live in hot weather, just adding a cube of ice every day works magic. And these tips are things that lots of people don't know. Lots of people just buy their flowers and put them straight in the vase and leave a bunch of petals under the water and then ask themselves why didn't their flowers last as long as they should have. And it's not the quality, it's that flowers usually don't last long is because people don't know how to take care of their flowers.
I'm really proud of my creation. I love it so much. Thank you so much for all the tips. After all these tips, I'm sure my flowers are gonna last a lot longer than they used to.
For sure.
Thank you all for joining us today in this flower class with Juliana. We all learned so much, and I really hope you're loving your creation as much as I'm loving mine. It was just gorgeous. Please stay tuned for more floral classes and make sure to share your bouquet with us on the social media channel.